Hi guys, welcome to the Revive Stronger podcast, the Improvement Season podcast. I think I did that last time as well. I'm here with Pascal, and actually I may have even introduced the last one now. It's kind of, I'm getting that, what's it called when you have like something you feel like you've done it before? Deja vu, that's the one.
Yeah.
Deja vu is a weird thing.
It is. I mean, I have no idea how they work, except for the explanation in the Matrix. But that's probably not the case for us.
I mean, who knows? Fuck.
Yeah, I don't know.
Life is, I mean, when you, I mean, not that we're going to go into that rabbit hole, but when you think about life, you're just like, I try not to think about it too much because then I just get lost.
Yeah. I mean, there have been times where I was very much philosophizing. No, what is it called? How is it called then on English?
Yeah, I don't know. You're going, philosophizing.
Yeah, because that's how you would say it on German.
Right, that
like kind of like philosophieren. It's kind of, if you were to directly translate it. So I was actually then thinking in kind of philosophical terms, right? At times where it's just like, I think we've even touched on that at some point, that nothing really matters if you really think about it. I mean, we are just, we are a mere second in the time span of the universe. So it doesn't really matter. It really doesn't. So
it can quickly fall into quite depressing sort of feelings. Like,
it is. But we don't really, once again, it's like you said, we don't really want to go down that rabbit hole. We've been talking about like posing in the off season. So let's touch on that one first.
Yeah, so Pascal and me were just like, so what have you been up to? And I was like, I just was doing some posing. Sometimes, I don't know if this is the same for you, Pascal, but particularly later in my meso when I've got like a pretty good pump and I'm just like, I just feel like I'm feeling myself a little bit. I'm going to do some posing. So I come back home. I've got like a decent setup here. It's actually not great because it washes me out so badly. On the video, when I watch it, it doesn't look that bad. But then when I take screenshots off it, for whatever reason, it's extra washed out. So I'm like, man, that's shit. I need a better setup.
I would assume that it has something to do with the software. You are doing the recording with your mobile device, aren't you?
Yeah, front-facing camera too.
Yeah, what? So Google phones, so the Google Pixel is very, very well known for having a very good image processing software in there. Because it's kind of, once again, it's taking a picture and then it's processing it in the camera or in the phone itself. And then often what it is that you see on the display is not exactly what you then get out afterwards. It's kind of probably the same for you taking like videos, taking a look at the monitor or like the screen, and you're thinking like, yeah, this looks good. And then you take the picture or take the video and you're just like, what is this? This is not what I'm even seeing here on the screen. Right.
So what? There's that sensation of like, I don't know, you're hairy, you're pale normally, and so those two things are not good for aesthetics. But then also you're just like you said, you're kind of just like a blob. I kind of feel like bubbly. I feel like I'm maybe a little bit better than a blob, slightly bubbly, but not far off a blob.
You're better, but the thing is, it's exactly like you said. You are hitting a pose, and you can't even tell whether you're flexing the muscles or not. Right? But this is also, I think, a very valuable thing to bring up and say when people are talking about when should I start to practice my posing. Of course, you could practice very early in the season, but often it's not really something that is valuable to you, because if you hit poses and you ingrain maybe some back techniques or kind of movement patterns, that you really ingrain those, and getting rid of those afterwards is much, much harder than starting at a position where you actually then can see what really is going on and whether you are in a proper position or not. And then if you're then posing like you right now in the off season, sometimes you can't even tell whether you are very much engaging a muscle the appropriate way when you are posing.
It's an interesting discussion because, I have it all the time where I have clients who they're interested in one day competing. And so they want to get some posing. Like they're like, can you like teach me how to pose or critique my posing or something? And I'm like, I don't want to do it too heavily. I'm happy. And even if they're thinking of competing, like, I don't know, in the nearest long-term future, I'm like, don't kind of obsess about it. Don't get too into, like you said, you don't want to ingrain them. I'm like, it's cool to get the basics of this is how you flare your lats. This is roughly how you hit a front relax. Like go through the mandatory so you can, I don't know, you don't look at, because I think it's nice to be able to hit them somewhat so that you can kind of assess progress a little bit more easy. So you have like standardized posing as well as a standardized photo setup or whatever. But like you said, like you're going to lose fat in all sorts of different places and probably not evenly. And so what might look good now, you might have to completely tweak by the end of like your contest season, and it's going to be harder if you've got that ingrained. It's kind of like, I don't know, learning how to, like how hard is it sometimes to have got out of the bad habits we learned when we were first lifting. It takes a while to get back into like good lifting habits.
I can actually give you a good example. When I was learning to play the bass guitar, I was teaching it myself, and back then there wasn't anything like YouTube. And I was then actually teaching it by myself and all that kind of stuff. And at some point after like 3 or 4 years, I actually then went to a teacher. And the first couple of weeks, what it is that we had to do was to relearn some of the movement patterns with my fingers because I was hindering myself and making faster progress. Because some ways that I was actually then just like moving my fingers didn't allow me to then be even faster in the future, or at least it makes it much, much harder then for me. Right? And this was one of those things. If I had gone to a teacher from the get-go, I could have learned that the appropriate way. Of course, that's not to say that your way is the wrong way, because sometimes we see it with people who do things in a very weird manner, but still they are becoming exceptional in their endeavors. But starting kind of the fundamental principles and learning them the appropriate way allows you then to actually modify those in the future as well.
It reminds me, I don't know, it's just, you can apply this to so many areas in life, just because I know my dad was having some tennis lessons. And he's not a young guy, and he has learned how to play tennis like for many, many years. And so for him to pick up the new techniques and stuff, he was like, it was really hard because I have all these bad, like quote unquote bad habits, or like you said, kind of things you've just developed because you didn't know any better of how to do it. And so you're just finding the way to somewhat do it. And so it's really hard to kind of pick them up. So yeah, I guess that's a bit of a, I think there's probably listeners who are thinking, oh, I should be practicing my posing. And this is why I'm not hot on people having to like do tons of posing in their off season. Like I can see there's kind of pros and cons to it, but I think sometimes the cons outweigh the pros in that sense. So like the pros are really just like, I don't know, you keep your level of posing endurance or what have you, like you, but I think once it's kind of like learning how to ride a bike, at least it has been for me. Once you have like posing basics down, they don't disappear. Like you still have them, and then you can tweak them again, because even season to season, you're probably going to have to tweak your posing. At least my posing it's just got better season to season, really. But I've also had to tweak it as I can hit poses differently because I've got more muscle in certain places, or I'm leaner in certain places, so I want to show it off, for example. So
yeah, and additionally to that, I think there is no inherent value in continuing to pose, because it puts a little bit more of a focus on your look, which then can possibly make you deviate from the original plan, because you're overly obsessed of like, oh no, I'm getting actually fatter and fatter, when in reality this is probably what you have to do in order to make some progress. And what I always like to say, all right, when you're in the off season, you're a performance athlete. When you are in the season, so basically in a contest prep, you are the physique athlete. And the closer you're getting to the show, the more of a physique athlete you become. And the further you're getting away from the shows, the more of a performance athlete you should become. And that's why being overly obsessed or continuing to do something like posing practice, I don't think that it's the right time. It's like every other sport. You are not doing the competition things when you're far away from the competition. And I think that's the same here as well, which comes with even more detriments from a psychological perspective.
It's like the first law is like specificity, isn't it? And it's exactly that. It's specificity. Yeah. It's just, it's actually very, very rare that we need to actually practice posing, because we like, especially as like natural bodybuilders earlier in their career, you're not competing that regularly. So it's like, and
maybe it also makes you want to go back onto the stage way too early. I think that this can then also be a detriment to your overall progress.
I think it's the only thing I will say that's tricky with posing that I definitely battled, not last season, but the seasons before that, because I had the experience for last season, is if you try and pick it up too late, you're so just can't be asked that it becomes like torture. Like posing is like, I don't think people really realize how hard it is when you're cold, you're hungry, you're tired. Sometimes the last thing you want to do is stand on a cold floor and pose, and you're just like, fuck this shit. Like, especially when you're like not even like, I don't know, after a refeed day, or you've not got a pump, you're just doing it first thing. But it's more and more important as you get closer. So I like to get people, like, there's like a sweet spot where they've still got the energy to really get it done, and then they can almost taper off a little bit towards the end, or just have like maintenance posing volume versus like learning posing volume, which they can get in earlier. I don't know if you experienced that, like, because you had to pick it up quite late as you were going through, but I think your diet fatigue wasn't too bad.
No, it wasn't. And also, I think it always depends on the person and how well they are moving, and how easy it is for them to pick things up. Because some people have a very hard time coordinating, like, posing. And this is also something that you see in other fields as well. I do remember the time when I was working in the photography industry, that there were models who couldn't move at all. You told them to push their hips a little bit backwards, and they moved their entire body, basically, right? And that's the thing also with just like posing. See it as dancing. Not everyone can dance, and some people can dance better than others, and some people have an easier time actually learning to dance than others. And it's kind of the same here as well. And I didn't really have a super hard time actually getting adjusted to that, whereas then other people need to actually then practice more. And also here, it's kind of the same principle that applies to everything in life. Some people will come easier to you than other things, or so.
Yeah. No, you're completely right. If anyone wants a laugh, we talk about this sort of thing before, but on this channel, on YouTube, if you look back at my old videos, you can see me trying to pose. I literally have like, I think it's like Matt Ogus. He's posing like on my laptop over there, and I'm recording myself, and I'm like looking at him. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is the side relaxed. This is like the rear double bicep, and it's so cringy and bad. But over time, like like I said, once you've kind of got the basics, it's like learning how to ride a bike. Like you pick it up super quickly again. But yeah, the pose that and I think we've discussed this before, that I really, really want to bring up is my front relaxed. I think it's always going to be my worst pose. Yeah. Like, front relax and front lat spread. They're going to be my two worst poses. But I'm kind of happy to think, when I think about it, like I'm not happy that they're not great poses, but when I think about the fact that all my other ones aren't, I wouldn't say bad, and I would say some of them are definitely strong, it makes me feel a little bit better about it. Although front relax is one of the ones you probably really don't want to be a weak pose, because it hurts you immediately. And
it really, so if your front relax is strong, or just also front lat spread is strong, you really stand out, where it's like you lock it in and boosh, the wings come out. It's just like, it just gives you a better placing, I think, overall. Not just because you're in that position the most when you're on stage, but it's just like, once the wings flare out, it kind of separates, I hate to say it like this, the boys from the men. I know it may not be the most appropriate example here, but it kind of is like that, where it's like, and then you stand there and you see, all right, he has it. And probably I'm going to watch him in the next poses more often.
It's because I think those poses are so heavily influenced by like the uncontrollable elements of like bone structure and what's it called? Like I guess muscle insertions and attachments to some extent, like quad sweep, like waist circumference to shoulder circumference. Waist like to shoulder ratio, that sort of thing. And you can immediately see like, have they got that X-frame or not? And also like some people's delts, you can have big delts, but some people, the way they attach, they pop and they like look rounded, whereas other people, they just kind of like look flat. And I know I've got that like, and other people who are very good have that kind of flat look, whereas some people, they just like, they've just this round capped shoulder, and it's just the way they attach the delts. So yeah, I have to, that's why building up my quads to just be as big as possible and the upper chest. And if I can, I think no matter how big I make my lower lats, I don't think they're ever going to creep outside to make my waist look smaller. I just don't think they can protrude that far. Even if I went on like gear, I don't think I'd ever have my lower lats like coming out, like front relaxed pose.
I'm always wondering, how is that even possible with some people, how far they are going out? I'm just like, what is happening with their arms? It's like, they are down here.
It's crazy. So, that's what I was doing. But I'm feeling, I think, last time we checked in, I was saying how, like, I was feeling a bit like some of the potential, I guess, massing fatigue would be the way you could call it, surplus fatigue. But I think that was just a short-term thing. Like, my appetite is still, like, when I think about how easily I'm taking down 4,000 calories, it's not a struggle. Like, I'm taking it down super easy compared to previous times.
Are you already considering something like a mini cut and over the next couple of months or so?
Not over the next couple. I want to, because basically, I think last time, and maybe I'll adjust my thought process, but I think last time my off season, I used them too often. I think I used it at inappropriate times where my appetite was still good, my performance was still good, I was still at a good level of like condition, like there was just no need for the mini cut. Whereas this time I want to use it when like it's like adding sets. Previously, I'd have added sets just because I thought more was better. And I think previously my mindset behind mini cutting was being leaner is better, because that was my thought process. We hadn't come out with all this discussion with kind of Eric Trexler and Greg Nuckols, who were kind of like, is this real? Like, they actually questioned it. No one had really questioned it. It was like a said thing, but now it's kind of coming to light that isn't actually real, which is awesome, because now I haven't got that thought process in mind. It makes complete sense now. And so I want to use mini cuts because I don't see them as, they are aggressive and they are fatiguing. I don't think they are kind of cost free in that sense. So I want to use them as sparingly as possible. So I think right now I'm better off, rather than taking like a mini cut, just take a double deload, whatever, an active recovery week and a deload, reduce the fatigue, and then come back into things. Like, my performance is on a high. I feel good. I'm eating well. I have no reason to consider a mini cut right now, apart from the fact that I've done it before and I'm like, ooh, I'm getting like, I can't see as clear muscle definition stuff. I'm just like, no, I'm riding it through. So no thoughts really. I have contemplated it, but I have rationalized it that I don't think it's the right move for me. Maybe I'll come back and decide, actually it would have been a good move, but I honestly don't think it will have been.
I think it sounds like a good plan that you're running with.
I appreciate that. How's things on your end? How's the ankle? Because that was the thing, isn't it?
It's still not 100%, unfortunately. I've tried like this week. I was in a deload and I just went in there and thought like, okay, let's see how normal squatting is actually feeling, right? So I took my shoes on and I loaded the barbell just a little bit, nothing fancy, and I couldn't really squat down because the right ankle still kind of caved in. I wasn't really feeling that stable. I can still probably do something like hack squats and maybe by now something like Smith machine squats if I have my feet a little bit forward and there's not that much of an ankle dorsiflexion. But yeah, that's just the situation. And it's crazy because it's now over 2 months ago.
It's been ages, man.
Yeah, it's crazy. But it's just...
You went skiing 2 months ago?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. How has time flown that fast?
That's crazy, eh? It was at the beginning of March. And it just shows, though, that these kind of things, when you break a bone, it also takes a long time to heal up, right? But those things, I even read that it can take up to several months to heal. And in the moment, you think like, yeah, probably it's going to be all right here after a couple of days or weeks. And the wrist, it actually healed up quite nicely or in a short period of time. Even though that it felt awful in the moment during the time when I was actually then in a snowboard or doing the snowboarding trip. I couldn't really put any kind of pressure on my wrist because it hurt so much. And that one healed very quickly, but apparently the ankle takes much longer, so can't do any kind of calf raises at the moment as well. So the calves still stay tiny, And yeah, I mean, right now in a deload, and then we move into the next mesocycle, which then takes us all the way to the London seminar. And then after the London seminar, also deload. And yeah, that's basically where I'm at the moment.
The London seminar is not actually, I mean, it's going to have come and gone, and we're going to be like, what the hell?
Yeah.
That's going to be crazy. But I guess with your, at least, and that's the great thing with bodybuilding, is you can find ways to keep stimulating your quads. Calves, not so much, I guess, because it requires that ankle mobility.
That's the thing. I couldn't really train calves here over the past weeks. The thing is, though, that I have the feeling that calves, they react very poorly to training stimulus anyway. You really, just due to the nature of the calves, you have to really hammer them hard and often and with a lot of volume because of their muscle fiber type and all that kind of stuff. And if you then just do like two times per week with 3 sets or so, I mean, the difference between that and not training them at all is very, very little, right? Yeah. That's why I know it's the calves. It's not the worst muscle group that needs to be put on a back burner or so. Yeah, and then other than that, I mean, it's just a lot of then leg extensions and stuff like that, right? And then maybe even something like split squats and stuff instead of very much squatting movements. And I guess that's all right. Of course, it's not the most fun, but that's where you then kind of redistribute your focus onto other body parts, which I'm doing right now. And I think that there's always kind of a time and a place then for those kind of things. And instead of seeing this as a negative thing that occurred, I like to turn things around and see the opportunities that came out of it. And that is now just you can focus on other body parts. They are fine.
Hi guys, Steve here. Just wanted to take a moment of your time to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we pride ourselves on providing personalized service that will take your physique and knowledge to the next level. If you're interested, check the description and sign up.
The silver lining. There's always a silver lining somewhere. So no, I like that. That's really cool. And I guess for you, in terms of mini cutting or anything like that, I imagine that's not like a thought in your mind, since you maintained for a long time and you're not much overstage.
No. I could see myself still taking advantage of the summertime, that maybe then in July, August, when it's still warm outside, when you're still moving a little bit more, so where also going out on a walk doesn't require you to put on a lot of clothing. I always find it easier to cut through the summertime than the wintertime, and this then also nicely sets you up for a prolonged gaining phase through then the winter time. So I could see myself like maybe the end of the summertime to do something like this, a shorter one of like 4 weeks, strip down a little bit, and basically once again prepare yourself for then the gaining through the winter. And then maybe who knows what next year will bring. I don't think that I will step on stage next year because I haven't really had enough productive time so far in the off season. But at the same time, you could always make the argument of like, hey, if you were still in a relatively positive environment in terms of calories, you didn't really deviate too much from the last time that you've been on stage, and you have so much more time now, and the last time you weren't really that lean, you could actually then go to stage and try to far exceed what it is that you've been capable of doing like the last time, and this time then treat it as a proper stepping on stage. So really bringing that conditioning that I wouldn't say that I was lacking the last time, but I know that I could take it much, much further because I've proven that to myself.
Yeah, I think it's a case of like when the what's it called, like strike when it's hot, something like that. Like if you're on the roll in your off season and things are going really well, I wouldn't interrupt that for like a contest prep, probably, unless there was like a good reason for it. Yeah. But in the same instance, if like, I don't know, you've dieted down and you're like, I wasn't considering it, like kind of like what you ended up doing a little bit, where you're just dieting down and it was all going smooth, and you're like, no, I could actually take this to stage now, like striking while it's, so I feel really good. It's quite nice. I think some people will benefit from having that like less pressured approach, where they just kind of like go with the flow almost, and like the stage is always there, so it's like, I don't know, like you could just like you don't have to always be like 2024. That's when I'm stepping on stage. It could just kind of come to you in a sense.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, with everything that happened over the past years, so many unexpected things that kind of threw a spanner in my process and progress. I don't really want to just like be stubborn about those things. I take it as it comes. And I think that this is the most relaxing thing about it all. You don't really kind of put any kind of pressure on yourself, because why? It doesn't really... No one else does care about that. No one else thinks like, Pascal, you should be competing, or you should be gaining X, Y, Z in the offseason. It's all about me in the end. And maybe now people will listen to it. But then 5 minutes after they've switched off, they don't really think about my process, but maybe the things that they can apply for themselves. So in the end, no one really cares what I do. And that's all right. This is not meant as a like... I'm moaning about it, but I really, this is just like human nature, and that's absolutely all right.
Yeah, it's almost, you can end up putting undue pressure on yourself when in reality, like, you're almost being, like, how are you that self-obsessed that you think everyone cares about you? It's like, you don't think you're being that way, but that's almost what it is. Yeah. It's like, I don't know, the people who talk about their haters, it's like, like proving my haters wrong. I'm like, do you really have that many haters? Like, do you really? Like, I don't know. It's never, I'm not sure you really did. You have more supporters than haters as well. Yeah. So
That's true. Yeah.
But yeah, maybe we'll end up mini cutting possibly at a similar time.
Yeah, it could be.
I know I don't have similar to you. I'm not planning in advance. And in fact, maybe I should, because like Christmas wouldn't be ideal to mini cut, but even then, like I know if it came, I just end up going to maintenance, or like around Christmas, I would just not diet.
Yeah.
Like if it was part of the for me, I think probably similar to you, life very like I can quite often allow bodybuilding, whatever I want bodybuilding wise, that makes most sense, just fits with my lifestyle.
And the thing is, we've talked about it quite often in the past already, right? People make those events to something that it truly isn't. So if you then participate at, I don't know, let it be something like a wedding or something like a birthday, then maybe it's one day or maybe it's one meal. Does that really make that much of a difference? No. And in the end, man, I mean, I'm now turning 35. If I can't stand up for my own decisions and what I deem as appropriate, man, what the fuck is wrong with me? So for myself, I make the rules. No one else is forcing me to have something for dinner or to eat there. Even at an event like this, I can still participate. And if I choose to not have anything to eat there, then you can believe that I will not have anything to eat there. And yes, some people will say something, but who gives a fuck? Like, honestly, it's not that they will think like days after, so Pascal, I saw that you haven't had anything to eat. Is everything all right with you? I'm a little bit concerned. No one does that, to be honest. Maybe unless you were living in Italy or Greek, and then the entire family is like, Papa, what is wrong with you?
There are some culture, like I have some clients who are like, just it's like huge part of their culture is like having family dinners and stuff together. Like, and I'm like, it's almost a world that we're not, like, we can't understand and not part of.
Absolutely.
And sometimes there's compromises, but you're right, in terms of like a wedding, like no one is focusing on what you're doing and like whether you're drinking or not, really. They might see it in the moment, but I think once you are of a certain age, you're past because I know for me, after my accident and everything, I didn't drink alcohol, but I was still like of that age where everyone would drink alcohol, and I felt pressured into doing it. Mm-hmm. But then once I owned who I am and what I enjoyed, and I was just like, no, that's not like part of like what I enjoy and I don't want to do it, people started bothering me less about it. And then it's just like, it falls. And it's like, oh, you can live life on your terms. You don't have to live it on everyone else's terms. Like I said, there's time for compromise. Maybe it's a cultural thing or whatever it is.
So last weekend, Katie and I, we were on kind of, what should we call this? It was kind of a town celebration. Like, it was a small event where we are living. And we actually went to that place because one of Katie's work colleagues asked us to actually join him and meet another work colleague of Katie. And the kids, so Hugo was at his father's place and Tony was at his grandma's. So we were actually without kids for the first time in ages, right? In ages. And then we went to that fest and we stood around there, and it really wasn't for us. It was actually freaking awful, to be honest. But then we stood there, had a little bit of a discussion. At some point, Katie and I said like, oh, right, we're going to pick up Tony now from his grandma. And they asked of us of whether we are coming back. And we immediately said like, no, we are not coming back. Like, and that was the end of the discussion. And I know in the past, when you're younger, right, people then kind of try to convince you to come back, of like, oh, come on, don't be that guy, come back, let's have a good time. And then you always fall into that type of personality who then tries to justify either his behavior or comes up with any kind of excuses of like, I will try to see what I can do about this. And in reality, you know that you will not come back. And this time now, you're old enough to just like own it and say like, I'm not coming back. I don't really enjoy it here. It was nice to actually stay here with you, have a little bit of a conversation. Well, we are going to pick up Tony and then we are heading home. And that's the end, right? And I think that this also then kind of applies to other things around, for example, training and nutrition. I don't need to justify my behaviors anymore for anyone else other than myself or even my family. Right? This is a different thing. But for others, no. Right? And if I decide to do something, then I own that action and also that behavior. And I don't need to justify that.
Yeah, I think it's, what was I going to say? Also in those sort of situations, when you do the thing where you almost people please in that sense, you end up maybe even putting yourself in a position where you really don't enjoy that. And so when the opportunity comes to do it again, you just turn it down versus doing it as much as what you enjoy it and then leaving. Then, like, it just ruins everything if you end up like in that sort of situation.
Most of the things that I do regret in my life are the things that I did not because I wanted it to, but because I felt forced in doing so because other people thought that I should be doing it. Does that make sense?
Do you have an example?
So, for example,
it does make sense. I want an example.
If you're an employee, for example, right, and you don't have the best connection maybe with your boss, and you always feel like you're the stupid asshole who is supposed to do all of the fucked up shit that no one else is doing, for example. Especially when you're an apprentice is the best example. There was a time here in Berlin where I was working in the media industry. And there was a time where apprenticeships weren't paid. But everyone thought that you need to be an apprentice in order to actually work your way up. And there were so many agencies and companies taking advantage of that. Because it's a free employee. They didn't have to pay. And those guys, they worked their asses off in order to actually make it. Right? And this was one of those examples where it was like, you don't get any kind of appreciation. You just do the shitty work. And you're kind of twisting and turning yourself into something that you actually aren't. And you don't really stand up for yourself. The person above you is actually patronizing you and is actually crushing you to be a small, tiny worm. And in reality, normally you would not actually tolerate that. But because your incentives were, of course, or like the thought process behind it is, all right, I will achieve something. I will be fat at some point, when in reality that never happened. And that's where you weren't really true to yourself, to your normal, to the person that you normally are, right? You kind of, someone else forced you to become someone else. And I hated that. And whenever I look back now, I would love to relive those moments and stand up for the person I actually am and say like no, or give them my honest opinion and feedback in the situation instead of just being the yes-sayer. And that's the problem most of the time.
I think I suffered similarly to that sort of thing, in not that I have that example, but just in situations where, for example, I was bullied at school. I think it was largely a lack of confidence in like just a lack of confidence, and I couldn't stand up for myself at the time. So similar, like to you in those sort of situations, I wish I could go back and just be like, no, you guys are just complete assholes. And like, I don't know, I think when you're that young, some people are good at it, some people aren't. And I certainly wasn't good at like having confidence and speaking my mind. And it's still something I struggle with sometimes, like truly speaking my mind and like holding things back in my head. But you always feel better. And I think it helps everyone when you're just open and honest with things. So anyway, that got into, I don't even know how we got to this point.
I have no idea.
The philosophy kind of took a turn.
Yeah. We can actually then go into talking once again about muscle group. And we touched slightly on the calves. So we could actually take advantage of now talking about calves and calf training. If you would like to, then we could actually start with those.
I say head over to the podcast with Scott Stevenson.
That's true.
If you have really stubborn calves,
actually,
he covered that pretty well.
Yeah, that's true.
But we can talk about it. We can give our kind of opinions at least on it.
Okay.
One thing I'm still not sure about that we discussed. I don't know if we want to start like we do every other one.
Exercise
selection.
Yeah.
So this actually ties into it. So I don't know what your opinion on this is, Pascal. So I'd be interested. Bent knee and straight leg. I'm still definitely of the opinion that straight leg variants targeting, I always get these the wrong way around. The gastroc, I believe, is the big chunky one that's like visible for the most part. That's the one you're going to really see, whereas the soleus is kind of the one more in and around the ankle and kind of more so hidden underneath. I'm still definitely of the opinion you want to bias the gastroc straight leg training more because that's the more visible part of the calf, and so that's going to show more on stage and just in life. And so I have started personally incorporating a bit of bent knee calf training. I had actually before we spoke with Scott, just because we have one of those seated machines at Yorkie. So I'm like, it's just so convenient to just sit in there and do it. It's actually more convenient than standing and doing a calf raise. And I just thought I'd experiment with it. He brought up the example, I think, of, who did he bring up? Welsh, amazing bodybuilder, Lewis, first name. Why have I forgotten? Lewis is his last name. He owns Dragon's Lair. Why have I forgotten his first name?
Flex Lewis. Or?
Flex Lewis, that's the one. So is it, his first name is not Flex, is it? Flex, I don't even know.
I don't know, actually.
I feel like an idiot right now. Anyway, but he brought up the example of him and his calves, and I kind of looked at those photos.
James, it's James. I've never heard actually James Lewis.
Yeah,
I just knew him by Flex Lewis.
Yeah. I was like, is Flex's first name? Anyway, that's a funny.
He's a Welsh bodybuilder.
Yeah, Welsh.
Well, I didn't know that actually.
Yeah, his actual brother has talked to me a few times on Instagram.
For real?
I didn't. I thought it was a fake account. He was like, because it said he was like Flex Lewis's brother. I was like, this can't be real. This guy's pulling my leg. But we actually had a little bit of a discussion with him. He's more like strength and conditioning based. But anyway. I looked at him and his calves. I was like, yeah, I kind of see where Scott was coming from. But I think for me, with my calves, like if I just use myself as an example, the insert of my gastroc is so high compared to like where my soleus is. And I have big ankles anyway. I just think training my soleus, I'm just not sure it's going to look better aesthetically than just making my gastroc bigger. So I don't know. I'm a bit unsure about straight leg to bent knee variants, but I'm still of the opinion more straight leg. And then, I mean, in terms of exercise selection, you're wherever you can perform it. So if you've got stairs, you can do stair calves. You can do single leg, both legs. You got leg press. You got hack. You can probably do it on a hack squat somehow or a V squat. You can do them on machines, which are my preference if possible. And then, Smith machine as well. Like, there's no excuse not to do them, but there's like every one doesn't look that different. It's like you just like pushing the calf up and stretching it down. So
that's true.
But yeah, what's your opinion on bent knee to straight leg?
The thing is, I think that this once again goes back to where do you feel it the most? There's one of those things like, if I were to tell you like, okay, bent knees are more so hitting the gastro also, right? And you're saying, this isn't where I feel it the most. Who's right then? This is kind of the discussion that we have around like biomechanics. If I tell you like my back, I can feel it very, very well on lat pull downs when I have a little bit of an arch there, you can't tell me that my back isn't engaged. Kind of, you know? Right. And when it comes to those kind of things, I think that it's trial and error. Go in there, see what works best for you. And this also then boils down to exercise selection, because for me personally, I never really had a good connection on the seated calf raises. I don't know why, but that machine simply doesn't really work for me. Whereas doing them on a leg press machine is freaking amazing. This is the way that I hit the calves the most. So whenever I have the opportunity of doing it on a leg press, it doesn't really need to be a plate loaded leg press, because it is of course a little bit inconvenient putting some plates on, even though that you don't need a lot of plates. Just go over to kind of that machine based leg press that you normally
pin loaded one.
Yeah, exactly.
Horizontal.
And this is where I then do it. And then I just, this is my most preferred way in doing things. And then, of course, standing calf raises is also all right. But the most important thing is actually then to really get into that stretch position, maybe pause for a slight second to take out the bouncing aspect of things, the Achilles tendon. And then you come up and really you want to squeeze up to your tippy toes. This is something that I've found helps very much where people, when they are reporting that they don't really feel connected with their calves, that they just come up to the first portion of their feet. But what you want to actually do is kind of as if you want to, this may be the wrong example, as if you were to kind of, you're a ballet dancer or so, that you want to actually squeeze it up a little bit more. Of course, not come up onto your tippy toes. It's not that you are standing like this, but more so just like right on the edge of your toes. So that you really squeeze it up there and hold it there and then calm down on the control. This is the way that I like to do things. And then it's kind of independent of what exercise you works the best for you. You can do it like standing, donkey, calf raises, all that kind of stuff. It all boils kind of down to the same outcome.
Yeah, donkey calf raises. I don't think I've ever had access to that.
Neither
I've heard good things. And I've also not had a friend who can sit on my back and let me do them as some people would do them. But it's a good point, in fact, with the, trying to get it as short as possible, basically up at the top. Sometimes I find like I get it up and then I have to like almost like do an extra like it almost looks like you're doing this double movement.
It's kind of a two-part movement, right? Where it's like you come up and then you need to push it up another time.
Yeah, for sure. And then definitely a good point in terms of like bouncing at the bottom. I have at various times tried doing like as long as like a 3-second pause, but often I haven't found that to be as good as just coming down and like doing just like a count, like a 1-second count.
Yeah,
I prefer that. Certainly better than bouncing is the 3-second pause. But when I pause too long, I just feel like it's really stretching the Achilles tendon and I lose the tension in the muscle. So if I come down for just like a second, like I keep it where I want it. It sounds like you're the same with that.
That's a very good point, actually, because I can't even recall what time frame that was or what year, but I think it must have been like 2017 or 18, where I would assume that it was, I think it was Alberto Nunes who talked about it, that you really want to take out the stretched portion of the lift, or kind of the bouncing portion where then the Achilles tendon is actually then causing the bounce and the tension, which I've tried, really then pausing for like 3 to 5 seconds. And I felt the same thing, the same experience as you, that it wasn't really as stimulating overall than for the calf musculature than if I were to just like control it on the way down, control it there, have a slight pause, and then come up again.
Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
I think this is one of those where it's experiment, like you said, like there's not like a really right and wrong way to do it, as long as you're not like putting all the tension onto, like, I don't know, you're moving your hips a ton and like you're putting it onto your glutes or onto your quads. Like it's very hard to fail the exercise. So, and like, so long as you're not bouncing, basically you're probably in a good position. Try pausing for different times, see what works best for you.
What about volume then?
So you brought up a great point. The thing with the calves is they're a really challenging muscle because not only are they stubborn, but because they're actually relatively small on your physique, like to actually measure circumference increase, I'm not sure the precision of a human measuring the circumference can like is precise enough, to measure the growth that it's going to get in months, let alone maybe years over time. Like you'd hope the circumference slowly increases, but it's kind of one of those muscles that I think a lot of people just kind of do in hope that it's going to grow. But I think if you really want it to grow, you have to do more than just like add a few sets to the end of the session. I think you really have to be purposeful with your calf training. So I don't think you could, and I think a lot of people can benefit from quite a bit of volume. So I think their minimum effective volume is maybe higher than a lot of people realize it really needs to be, especially because, again, people just don't focus on it. So it's hard because I think maybe minimum effective volume isn't as high as it, because people just don't focus on it. So anyway, roundabout way, let me think about volume. So I would say on the lower end, probably somewhere around maybe as low as 6, but normally more so 8 sets, I would say, per week on like the lower end. And then, I mean, they can go quite high. It's kind of similar to like we said with the delts. It's like, what's the upper limit? I think some people, they've really like big calves, like impressive calves. Their MRV, as you would expect, is not much higher than their minimum. So they almost just stick at that number. And for a lot of my clients, calves are like one of those, they're not competitors. They don't really care too much. They just don't want to have weedy little calves. They just want them to like be in the background growing a little bit. So I don't often even push volume on them. It's like they can actually quite often be optional for the non-competitors in particular. But for people who really want them to grow, I mean, I could see it going up to like 20 sets quite comfortably for a lot of individuals. I don't think that would be completely out of question. But I think for a lot of people, they just won't want to do that many. So that's where I would be with at least set volume in the week, I think.
As you guys know, I'm always very transparent and open about things. And here's another one. We've been doing this together since 2017, Steve. And I've worked with a decent amount of people by now. But when it comes to calves, I can say with honesty that I haven't had enough people or case studies to really come up with a good conclusion of where then the MEV to MRV lies. Unfortunately not, because there are too many people who either don't want to train the calves, secondary, who don't really want to put a lot of emphasis on the calves, where it's then they train them, but it's not enough to really see a significant change over the long term. Thirdly, it's like you said, such a small muscle group that to see a significant change from an appearance perspective, but also from a circumference perspective, adding like 1 centimeter to the calves when they are only like 35 centimeters in circumference measures is a lot from a percentage perspective. So, and that would probably take a lot of time and also a lot of dedication putting towards training the calves. And due to the things that are already brought up, I haven't worked with enough people who took calf training seriously or wanted to take it seriously enough over enough of a time frame to actually draw a conclusion. That's why I can't really say that, to be honest. I know that the minimum volume is probably somewhere around like 4 sets or so. That should be a safe assumption. For some individuals who have just like genetically amazing calves, they probably don't even need to train them at all, right? But I think it's safe to assume somewhere around 4 sets probably. And when it then comes to the maximum amount, I've never actually had someone who said like, Pascal, I really want to focus on the calves, so let's just try to reach our MRV. However, that being said, I work with people where we've pushed it up to around like 15 sets. Everything beyond that, never tried it, never did it. And that's why I lack the data, I lack the evidence so that I can draw a good conclusion of what MRV is. And I have to base it on some assumptions. And it's probably somewhere as a low point of the spectrum, probably if you want to actually be at MEV, so actually putting some stimulus towards it, probably somewhere around 6 sets as a starting point, and maybe all the way up to 20 sets. And I would also assume that then you're running into issues from a connective tissue perspective around maybe the knee joint or even the ankles or so.
Yeah, my experience with this, like you said, don't work with that many people that really want to grow their calves. But I have a few people that come to mind who, like, for example, I can say Mike Chalice, definitely someone where he would be listening to this and be like, I definitely want to grow my calves as much as possible. He's about that for every muscle group though. So we certainly have pushed, and he's on the end of the spectrum. When we're thinking about the volume spectrum, he's on the high end of the volume spectrum. Okay. Like we've tried as hard as we can to bring him like further down this way. Yeah. And he knows that, but he is definitely someone who he needs more stimulus to feel a stimulus essentially.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we have pushed them fairly high with him, and then my anecdotal experience comes in because in my last off season, really pushed calf training. And I think the hard thing is, I don't know where I've said this before, but I said it somewhere. I was like, I don't actually know if my calves, I know they're improved from last time I competed, because just visually, they're definitely bigger. I can just, like you just look at it and you're like, I can see they're bigger now. Like I feel like, oh, they've actually grown. But I am unsure if they grew during my prep from wearing the weighted apparel and doing so many steps, or if they grew in my off season and I just revealed the progress through fat loss, because it's surprising how much fat you actually hold in and around like the calf and the ankle and all that area. Like some people, they get like crazy shredded calves. So yeah, anyway. But you're right in terms of quite often the limiting factor is, for me, it was the feet. So I just started getting like pain in my foot basically, and I couldn't do like any more calf training. I was like, fuck, which is really frustrating. But I haven't been prioritizing abs and calves as much this off season, because I'm just like, I'm hoping I've got them to a point where they're good enough so they don't hold back my physique, and I can just be like, it takes a lot of effort to grow when you've got when your abs and calves aren't strong. It takes a lot of effort and time growing those, so I'm hoping I don't have to put it towards those anymore. I can put it towards the rest of me. That's hoping.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, absolutely. In terms of frequency, I mean, it's kind of pretty clear, right? We've talked about a frequency normally at around 2. It's probably just normal with that body part as well. And then you can probably also be quite aggressive with it. However, no one is actually wanting or doing this most of the time. I could imagine that you actually, once again, can increase the frequency quite aggressively, but then you will probably first run into issues around then connective tissue rather than systemic fatigue or muscular fatigue. Yeah,
I have pushed it to every day before, apart from one rest day. So I've done 6 days per week calf training, but I did run into the issues you mentioned. And I also got into this, where I got into that situation of like it's a bit of a weird one. I was just like, it's frustrating because there's some, like with some muscle groups, there's a clear volume landmarks. But for some, there's just like, you're in this like no man's land where you're just like, man, I just feel like I'm doing more for the sake of doing more. And I'm not sure I'm getting anything more from this. But I did a lot, and I think what I benefited from was I used to have a really poor mind muscle connection with my calves. And so by doing so much, I now can sit here and contract both calves. There was a time where I could just contract the left one, and then over time I managed to be able to contract the right one. My right one is a bit smaller than my left, weirdly. I don't know why. So I think I was saying, basically, it's like we've mentioned before, where it can look like someone has like really big volume landmarks, but they just can't, like, they don't have the mind muscle connection, or they don't have the intensity that they really should, because they just don't have like the neurological skill base there. I think that was me with my calves. So I think just putting loads of work into them, I can now get more from less, essentially, is what I'm saying. So I could do like 3 sets of calves, and I'll get a gnarly pump in my calves. Whereas before, I'd be like, I do like 5-6 sets. I'd be like, I don't even know what's going on here.
That's a good point, though, because intra-session volume, I would actually more so say is on the lower side of the spectrum. I feel that, same as with the bicep, for example, whenever I were to go above something like 3 sets, it really quickly feels very junky, to be honest. That's the same on something like calf raises for me, at least.
I find if I don't use down sets, that happens. My reps drop off really quickly on calves quite often. So yeah, 3 sets within the same rep range is normally sufficient. And also, at least for me, and I can't say this is necessary. Actually, no, I think for the majority of, like for Mike, for example, higher rep ranges tend to be more stimulative than lower rep ranges. And I would presume that's because the calves, you would think, more slow twitch, but is that, I can't remember if that is actually the case. I think actually the gastroc is more fast twitch, is it not? Or am I wrong? I can't actually remember now off the top of my head.
I would then be in the maybe in the camp of the former belief. I always thought that it's kind of slow twitch, but I could be absolutely wrong.
Yeah, I couldn't remember, but it makes sense if it was.
Exactly, due to just like you walk the entire time, but I could be completely wrong. Maybe it's just a common misconception.
I was just going to Google it. Because I think it's one of those muscle groups that have quite a... So yeah, actually, the gastroc is fast twitch, apparently, more so. And the soleus is more slow. But like we've said, I imagine someone like Jared Feather, his calf is just like all fast twitch because it's huge and it responds really well. Whereas it might be the reason mine and Mike's, maybe yourself as well, Pascal, our calves respond better to high reps. We feel more of like the pump and disruption from those is because we have, unfortunately, a more slow twitch calf.
Could be, absolutely.
Which is why it maybe isn't grow as much. Although your calves are not, you don't have tiny calves.
They are not bad. I mean, if you just take a look at the conditioning the last time as well, they actually pop out, and they're, at least I don't really hold a lot of fat around that body part. That's the thing, right? Which is a good thing. So yeah. So
we're on frequency. So you said 2, and then we're set up to 6. I guess we're on kind of rep range.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I mean, I was saying higher reps for me. Below 10, can't think I ever really program that. It's normally like a 10 to 15, and a 15 to 20 is kind of where I land with calf training. And then like they do respond quite well from intensity techniques, I find.
What I've found is exactly what we've talked about, that this kind of 2-part movement. I felt like whenever I go too heavy, so i.e. too low in repetitions, I couldn't perform that 2-part movement anymore, and I couldn't really have that peak contraction at the top of the movement. Yeah. I could still move the load though, but I never really could fully contract the musculature. And
then the SFR just drops off when you don't do that full contraction. Just doesn't feel that great. And I think calves are one of those, again, like a lot of muscle groups, but calves are one of those where, especially if you end up bouncing it off your Achilles tendon, I don't know why people get some ego with calf training where they want to do loads of weight. I think ego just it attaches itself to like every bit of like bodybuilding. Calf training is not an exception. I've seen people literally on like Smith machines and they just put on like all the plates and they're like, do this fucking calf raise that you're just like, man.
Yeah, I don't get it. It's the same when it comes to delt training, to be honest. Going absolutely heavy. It's just something that I even said in the comments section, that the only place where I feel it is really in the joints. This is one of those exercises where, so delt work, when I go too heavy, I just feel it in the joints.
And I think when you do calf work, again, you just end up putting it onto other muscle groups as well. Like your knees will start bending, your hips will start extending, the glutes, the quads start coming in. It's like, no, you're trying to isolate the calf here. It's just not going to be, it depends on what you're trying to do. But that's at least where I find it. I guess we're on tips and tricks.
Tips and tricks. I mean, we've touched on it already, kind of. What I would like to hear your thoughts on is something like intensity techniques. Because what I found is when you use something like myo reps or rest pauses on something like calves, they get massively sore. And sore for weeks. You can't really do anything at all then anymore. And which then also carries over into something like hamstring training. And I don't know, what's your experience with that?
I haven't had that. My calves get sore fairly rarely. For me personally, this is. And because, like you said, haven't prioritized them to a large extent for many clients. But I have had a client who, when we have used metabolite techniques, we introduced them for week 1. I probably gave him something similar to what I would find and Mike would recover from fine, but he did not. So we had to be very careful with his calf training. I do find that actually calves, in some ways, there's some extremes where some people really respond to them and they get like, with metabolite techniques, for example, they'd need like 1 myo rep. Like they literally do a straight set and then they do 3-second rest and 1, and they're like, my calves are done. I can't do anymore. There's no, like, that would do them fine. Whereas for me, for example, like, I respond really well to them. Like, I get crazy pumps and disruption during it, but they'll be recovered after like a couple of days. Like, they don't get crazy sore or disrupted. But I can also say, I don't know if this is something you've experienced, Pascal. If you do like a lot of steps, or when you ever went hiking or for a run, do you feel it in the calves? Do your calves get fatigued?
I can't really recall, to be honest.
Okay. Because I know some
I just
people
recall
do.
like shin splints. That's the only thing that I can recall when you're just going or ramping up the walks or the step counts.
I think for those who maybe respond really well to calf training, quite often when they're doing a lot of walking and hiking, things like that, they get like really a lot in their calves. And I think it's because their day-to-day living, they just use their calves quite a lot. Whereas for me, I get nothing. Like, my calves don't get tired at all from that sort of thing. I think that's just related to like the higher inserts potentially and the loads going through the tendons and things. But yeah, tips and tricks more than anything is just, like you said, use the slight pause. Listen to the podcast that we did with Scott Stevenson, because he went into loads of different
that's true.
things that you can try, which are like, some of them are intensity techniques, some of them are the pause, and then I mean, actually one we already mentioned was like trying to train them like as soon as they're recovered, which could be every day, and just see how far you can ramp the volume. I would say, as one tip or trick, but you could apply this to any muscle group, is training them potentially first in your session before maybe an upper body day, because that's not going to impact. So for some people, if I did my calves first in my lower body session, I'm not sure it would really impact the rest of my lower body training, just because of the way they are. But for some people, I think it could ruin a lower body session. So a safe bet is to do them at the start of like an upper body session. So then you have to be switched on, do them, and then go through the rest. Your reward is getting a pump in your upper body.
That's in general a recommendation that I have of, if you feel that you don't have the energy and also mental capacity of doing it on a lower body day, to maybe do it and consider it on an upper body day, because most of the time you are more than fresh for this type of lower body movement on an upper body day, even towards the end of the session.
Yeah. So that's really all I've got.
Yeah, cool.
I don't think there's much else. I have tried occlusion. Have you ever tried BFR?
No.
It kind of doesn't work great, because I think with BFR, for your calves, I've seen people do it around the knee joint, but to really occlude the calf around the knee, it's like there's a lot of just like tendons and ligaments, and it's like just bone. So it's kind of hard to properly occlude it there. And from the research, from what I remember, someone might be able to kind of correct me on this, you're meant to do it around the upper end of the thigh, but then you occlude a fuck ton of like your upper leg as well, like you occlude your whole thigh. So it just hasn't worked amazingly for me, at least, BFR training. So
never tried it, to be honest.
But Myo Reps and Myo Match, they're great for calf training. Myo Match is actually horrendous.
Yeah. I mean, it's also horrendous on something like leg extensions, so I'm not surprised that it is on something like calf raises.
Yeah. Cool.
No, cool.
That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Next time, then glutes, and then we are done with the guide.
Glutes will be fun, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. No, cool. Then, guys, we are now with the London seminar. I just wanted to bring it up at 100 participants, or 100 people being there, with us included. And that is something that I'm very much looking forward to. You can still participate. A couple of tickets are left. I'm right now still considering what to present on. I have like a couple of things that I'm thinking of, but I would like to ask the audience whether they have some kind of ideas what they would, if they could decide of what I could talk about. Put that into the comment section below, so that I may have some good suggestions there and things to take into consideration.
Yeah, I know you mentioned that, and I'm going to give the guys a bit of a hand here, just in case no one says anything. Comment below if you're interested in Pascal talking about how to tackle dieting phases, and I guess the details behind that, because that's what you discussed to me, and it sounded, I thought really good. So
yeah,
people
so
would be think
basically,
that'd be a good topic.
I thought about, and this is a presentation that I already did for the member side, but of course, then presenting on it, I will add a couple of things, change a couple of things, and it's always a little bit of a different one. But basically, the name of the presentation was "Make Dieting Easy," because this is one of the biggest things that we are always working with our athletes, that many people have either the training kind of already figured out to some extent. Of course, there are always things to improve there as well, but especially with nutrition, it's something that many people struggle with. And I just find that dieting doesn't have to be hard. It's just most of the time people have maybe wrong expectations around the deficit, and they aren't eating like appropriately during that time frame in order to make the diet actually easy.
So I think that would be cool. And I have most of my presentation finalized. I said to Pascal, I worry that I get anxious and I end up rushing through my slides. So I've got, I don't know, I think there's like 30 slides or something I've got. I don't even know if that's a lot. But I'm hoping people will enjoy that presentation. I'm going to keep it to myself for now, just in case anyone's listening. It's going to be a surprise on the day. And the only other thing I was going to bring up was I can't wait for it. Just only because Harry, Coach Harry, reminded me of this, is give us a nice review over on Spotify or on any podcast provider. I haven't asked for that for a while. I need to start introing the other podcast and asking for it. But if you've listened this far, you should be subscribed to the channel. You should have given us a like. You can comment and give us, or if you're listening on Spotify, you can give us a 5 out of 5 rating. That would be highly appreciated. But yeah, I'm super pumped for the seminar. It's going to be a lot of fun. And it's all coming together now. So yeah, it's been a long time. Yeah,
it is. I'm very much looking forward to that. And haven't presented in front of people in over 3 years now. So normally we are just like talking into a camera, basically. What it will be like for having 100 people in front of you and then presenting will be quite different, to say the least.
Yeah, I find this super easy, like a one-on-one conversation with someone, even though it feels weird saying this, thousands of people listen to this, and that's kind of strange. And so presenting in front of 100 people should be totally cool.
Yeah.
But for some reason, it's way harder.
Yeah, it really is weird. But yeah, don't know. We make the best of the situation, I hope.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Then guys, thank you very much as always for tuning in. And I guess I'll speak to you guys next week. Cheers.
Cheers, guys. So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Steve. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge. And I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.